Reflecting on the events that transpired 3 decades ago when I was just 5 years old, the memory remains vivid yet blurred by the passage of time. Distinguishing between truth and embellishment can be challenging, but these are the recollections that have remained strong in my mind. Despite the gloomy overcast sky and the occasional drizzle, the children at morning daycare, myself included, were undeterred from enjoying outdoor recess on the playground. Being naturally quiet as a child, I frequently engaged in solitary activities like swinging on the swings or, on this particular day, occupying myself with larger toy trucks in the spacious lawn. As I sat alone, engrossed in my play, I suddenly felt a gentle impact on my back. Turning around, I spotted a white ball lying on the ground, seemingly stained with a substance resembling blood, although I reasoned it must be something different. As I grabbed it, a strange discomfort hit me, leaving me feeling slightly nauseous. Glancing around for the person who threw it, I noticed the area was mostly empty, with no one claiming it. Upon presenting it to the teachers, their astonishment was evident upon realizing it was blood, though they were clueless about its origin. After a couple of weeks have gone by, the thoughts of that day had faded. However, on another eerie overcast day, while wandering alone in the playground, I caught a glimpse out of the corner of my eye. Turning to look, I witnessed that familiar white ball falling to the ground and beginning to roll my direction, stopping just in front of me. Once more, I retrieved the ball, noting that it wasn't covered with any blood this time. Glancing towards the tree line from where it appeared to have been tossed, I scanned the area but saw no one. However, a moment later, a faint voice drifted from the trees. Despite my efforts to closely listen, the words remained too quiet to discern clearly. As I approached the trees in an effort to catch the voice more clearly, I encountered a chain-link fence separating the playground from the woods. As I drew nearer, the words, "You wanna play?" became clear. Attempting to peer through the dense foliage for a better view into the woods, I found my vision hindered by the dim light, struggling to see beyond the darkness. "You can't be out there," I responded. After pausing a moment to listen, I heard a girl's giggle and a response, "Come on, it's fun." I looked back and noticed the teacher assisting another kid. Then again, the voice repeated, "Come on." Glancing at the ball in my grasp, I made a decision to toss it over the fence, curious if the girl I heard would come to retrieve it. Observing as the ball landed amidst some bushes, I patiently waited, but there was no sign or sound of anyone emerging. "Are you still there?" I shouted into the quiet surroundings, but received no response. Glancing back again, I noticed the teacher still occupied with another child, prompting my decision to climb the fence and venture into the woods. I reasoned that I could quickly retrieve the ball and return. Even though the fence wasn't very high, the task of climbing it at the age of 5 presented its own set of challenges. And while the details may be fuzzy in my memory, I can recall receiving a few scratches along the way. Nevertheless, I successfully made it to the other side, now standing at the edge of the woods. With the ball barely visible inside the bushes, I cautiously advanced. The girl's giggling returned, again from the depths of the woods. "Here's your ball," I announced, plucking it from its hiding place. Pressing on into the woods, the laughter of the girl persisted, sending shivers down my spine with each eerie chuckle. As I continued my search, doubts began to cloud my mind, causing me to second-guess my pursuit. Just as I contemplated retreating to the playground, an unusual odor assaulted my senses, swiftly transforming into a nauseating stench. Then, in a startling moment that shook me to my core, I glimpsed a ghostly apparition, barely discernible as a young girl, hovering in the distance. As my gaze met the figure, I found myself paralyzed with terror, unable to move as the apparition floated away. taking with it the eerie giggles and foul odor. Moments later, I was startled by a sudden grip on my shoulder. Upon turning around, I found the teacher standing before me, her expression etched with anger as she demanded, "What are you doing?" Despite my best efforts to explain, she brushed off my words as nonsense and promptly guided us back to the playground. While leaving the woods, I glanced back several times, but everything appeared ordinary. Just the somber presence of the damp trees swaying gently in the subtle wind. After weeks had gone by, I bid farewell to the daycare as I transitioned into kindergarten. In my final days, I occasionally mustered the courage to approach the fence near the tree line. But to my luck, there were no more encounters with ghostly forces. Despite my young age, the haunting memory of those eerie days at the daycare still resurfaces in my thoughts to this very day. The rain tapped gently on the window during that ordinary early summer morning. I sat at the table, munching on a bowl of Cheerios, anticipating the breakfast Mom was preparing before starting my last week of the 5th grade. Dad, in his usual routine, readied himself for work. While I took a spoonful of cereal, I glanced at Mom and saw her gazing absently out the window. Her hand paused mid-cut with the tomatoes. "Mom?" I called. But she remained transfixed, knife in hand, her attention elsewhere. "Mom," I repeated, raising my voice slightly. Finally, she snapped back to reality, blinking and shaking her head as she returned to the present. "Oh, sorry, dear. I must have drifted off for a moment," she apologized. I didn't dwell on it. I understood that Mom led a hectic life, constantly juggling responsibilities. Between looking after me, Dad, and managing the household, she rarely had a moment to herself. After finishing our breakfast, we all went our separate ways. Upon arriving home later that afternoon, I was surprised to find the house not as neatly arranged as Mom typically kept it. "I'm home," I announced, but I was only met with silence. With no response, I wondered if she had stepped out, given the unusual quietness. As I headed towards the bathroom, I was startled to find Mom standing there in front of the mirror. Calling out to her, I watched as she slowly turned her head in my direction with an expressionless face. Yet, her gaze seemed to pass right through me rather than meet my eyes. With a hurried pace, she swiftly left the bathroom, brushing past me in her haste, and disappeared into her room. My anxiety grew as I became genuinely concerned. This behavior was entirely out of character for my mom. Typically high-spirited, talkative, and attentive, she was never one to brush me off like this. With hesitation, I called out to Mom again, my eyes fixed on the hallway leading to her room. Slowly, I made my way towards her door. Upon entering, I found her lying on the bed, eyes open, staring ahead. "Mom, are you all right?" I inquired. Her response came softly. "I just need some rest, dear." For the second time today, she had referred to me as dear, a term she has never used, especially when baby was her usual nickname for me. Something was clearly wrong with her, but I refrained from pressing her further, deciding instead to wait for Dad to get home. Feeling unsettled by the eerie silence indoors, I decided to play in the backyard, where I could find some peace. As I kicked around a soccer ball, I noticed my mom's face through the kitchen window as I looked up, her expression impassive as she looked in my direction. Wondering what had captured her attention, I scanned the yard, but no obvious cause for her vacant gaze. Returning inside through the back patio and into the dining room, I found my mom standing near the kitchen sink, greeting me with a wide smile. Once more, she addressed me as dear, her expression warm, but her demeanor strangely still. "What's for dinner?" I asked, met with her eerie, unwavering smile as she continued to stare at me. After a pause, she replied, "Whatever you want, dear." This departure from her usual meal preparation routine left me feeling increasingly uneasy. "You're giving me the creeps, Mom," I confessed, a concerned edge to my tone. She promptly reassured me that everything was okay, citing a headache as the cause of her strange behavior. With that settled, she got to work in the kitchen, preparing dinner for Dad's return. Taking the opportunity, I decided to catch a quick nap. As I gradually opened my eyes upon hearing the door close and Dad's arrival, I was startled to find Mom standing over me, her unsettling grin still in place, and a knife in her hand. "Dinner's ready," she declared before exiting the room. I exhaled deeply, relieved that the tension had passed. Entering the kitchen, where Mom and Dad were already waiting, I couldn't help but notice the chaotic mishmash of ingredients that passed for dinner. Dad's perplexed expression mirrored my own confusion as he voiced his concern, clearly noting Mom's odd behavior. "What on earth is all of this, Mary?" Dad's tone held a mix of disbelief and irritation as he surveyed the peculiar assortment of dishes on the dinner table. Mom's eyes widened with anger in response to this question, and she snapped back, "Then do it yourself," before promptly leaving the kitchen and heading to the bathroom, shutting the door behind her. "What's going on with her?" Dad turned to me for an explanation, and I explained that she had been acting oddly throughout the day. Agreeing to proceed with dinner and allow Mom some time to calm down, we attempted to put her attitude out of our minds. However, after a half hour had passed, with the bathroom door still shut, it was clear that her behavior was weighing heavily on both Dad and me. Eventually, Dad took it upon himself to go to the bathroom, knock, and ensure Mom was all right. Receiving no response, Dad's voice took on a note of concern. "Mary, I'm coming in," he announced softly as he cautiously pushed open the door. As the door swung open, I could discern Mom's reflection in the mirror. She stood there, unmoving, her gaze fixed upon her own reflection, still clutching the knife in her hand. It was then that I noticed she appeared to be bleeding. As Dad noticed her bleeding, he instinctively reached out to help. However, to my absolute horror, Mom let out a scream and swung the knife at him. "Go away," she shouted, her voice filled with desperation. I stood frozen in shock, tears streaming down my face, as Dad attempted to restrain Mom, only to be met with a few slashes from the knife before managing to subdue her. The room descended into chaos, leaving me feeling completely paralyzed by the horrifying scene unfolding before me. Despite my fear, I watched as Dad and Mom continued their struggle, the situation growing increasingly bloody. Fortunately, Dad succeeded in disarming Mom, prompting me to quickly retrieve the knife. However, as I glanced at Mom, her furious stare bore into me, intensifying the sense of dread coursing through me. "Chris, go call for help." Dad's urgent shout pierced through the chaos as he continued to grapple with Mom in her frenzied state. Her screams filled the air once again as I rushed towards the phone, my heart pounding with fear. With trembling hands, I grabbed the phone, dialed 911, and anxiously waited for the operator, my gaze fixed on the harrowing struggle before me, still engulfed in a state of panicked tears. As I held the phone to my ear, anticipating a dial tone, there was only silence. Suddenly, the lights in the house began to flicker erratically, adding to the mayhem. Mom's shout of "No!" echoed through the turmoil as Dad struggled to maintain restraint, only to collapse under the strain. In the commotion, Mom collided with and shattered the bathroom mirror. As the lights steadied and the dial tone returned, I quickly abandoned the phone and rushed to Mom and Dad's side to offer assistance. Finding them both sprawled on the ground, bloodied from the altercation, Dad began to rise, moving to check Mom, who appeared to suddenly awaken from whatever trance had gripped her. A look of shock washed over her face as she realized her surroundings. her gaze darting around the room in confusion. Meanwhile, I hurried back to the phone and dialed 911 once more, this time with greater success. Hurriedly, I fetched the first aid kit while Dad held Mom close, expressing his fear at almost losing her. Moving swiftly, we tended to the injuries as best we could, applying bandages to any significant wounds until the ambulance arrived. Thankfully, Mom and Dad emerged from the brawl relatively fine, though with numerous stitches and a considerable amount of explaining to do later on. Mom had no memory of the previous day. Her recollection ended with her preparing for bed the night before, with everything afterward a complete blank. We came to the conclusion that the mirror we had recently installed that day had some sort of haunting influence over my mom. Strangely, once it shattered, the ominous forces seemed to dissipate that night. Even to this day, the sight of a mirror fills me with dread, serving as a constant reminder of that terrifying night. I was 11 years old, going on to 12. I had several of my closest friends over for my birthday. Our activities mainly involved tossing footballs around in the backyard and rocking out on some Guitar Hero. I was fortunate to receive some fantastic gifts that year, with my parents surprising me with a brand new snowboard for the upcoming winter. As the evening progressed, we all gathered around the table, and my parents brought out a delicious birthday cake. The room was dimly lit, with the candles on the cake casting a soft, radiant glow across the walls. I could sense the warmth of those candles as they approached me, while all my friends around eagerly awaiting their share of carefully baked chocolate cake that my parents had prepared. A brief moment later, prompted by my mom's signal, everyone began singing Happy Birthday. With my best friend Keith's encouragement, I was instructed to make a wish. I paused briefly to contemplate my desire. In my grade, there was a girl named Sarah, who I had a crush on. While a few of my friends had already arranged to go to the Halloween dance tomorrow with girls, I had never experienced such an event with a girl myself. I've always been pretty shy. So, I made a wish for a girlfriend. "You've got to blow them all out," Keith reminded me, and I focused on the candles, blowing each one out. The room descended into darkness, and in that very moment, a girl's infectious laughter emerged from behind me, followed by a gentle tap on my back and the rapid echoing steps on the wooden floor. It was precisely at that moment that my mom restored the light by flipping the switch and approaching us, holding a cake knife. My reflexes guided me to glance behind and toward the diminishing echoes of those footsteps, with nothing but the darkened living room in view. "You okay?" Keith asked, to which I reassured him I was fine, and we proceeded with the cake. Later, long after my friends had left, I found myself abruptly awakened by the persistent tapping on my closet door. Glancing at my phone to check the time, I discovered it was 3 a.m. With the faint glow of my phone casting an eerie light on my face, the tapping continued, sending an unsettling chill down my spine. For a brief moment, I stared at the partially open, pitch-black closet. "Hello?" My voice trembling with hesitation. In response, a girl's voice replied, "Hello?" My heart skipped a beat, and I hurried my way to the light switch, flipping it on just as the closet door slammed shut. I dashed to my parents' room, urgently informing them that there was someone in my closet. My dad, displaying a confident demeanor, proceeded to my room and loudly demanded that anyone within the closet reveal themselves at once. He swung open the closet door, yet there was no trace of anyone inside. We diligently inspected the room, but it remained free of intruders. "Everything seems fine," my dad declared, and we retreated to bed. Though I was still shaken up, staring for a while at the closet, I heard no further disturbances throughout the night to my relief. The next day, Keith and I were at Keith's house, getting our Halloween costumes ready before setting out to gather candy and attending the school dance. I chose to dress up as a zombie, while Keith opted for a vampire costume. Although our makeup skills weren't particularly impressive, we managed to make it work. Meeting up with a couple of friends, we embarked on our Halloween trick-or-treating journey while en route to the school dance. Wandering from house to house on that chilly, spooky night, we eagerly collected our candy. The clear skies and the moon's luminous glow made it easier to navigate the streets as darkness descended swiftly. While en route to another random house, my attention was captivated by a ghostly-looking girl who appeared to be watching me from behind a tree a couple houses down. "Hey Keith, can you see her?" I inquired, pointing towards the mysterious girl. Keith glanced over and asked, "Yeah, I see her. Do you know her?" I shook my head and responded, "No, but she's just standing there, staring at us." Our conversation was momentarily interrupted by our other friends, diverting our attention. When I looked back at the girl's direction, she had vanished. As we pressed on, an eerie feeling gripped me, suggesting that I was being watched and followed by that ghostly girl. I would occasionally catch what seemed like glimpses of her as we roamed the darkened streets, but the sightings were so fleeting that, upon closer observation, I would second-guess my own thoughts. Arriving at the middle school, we realized the dance had started half an hour ago. As we neared the building, a group of our classmates were also heading in, but recognizing anyone in their costumes was a challenge. My eyes were peeled for Sarah, hoping for a chance to dance with her. The sound of the music grew louder as we went inside. I informed Keith that I'd catch up with him in the cafeteria where the dance was happening, but first I had to stop by the restroom. On my way out to reunite with Keith, I was startled by some spooky giggling coming from the dark classroom corridor. My curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously moved to check it out. A voice eerily similar to the one I had heard in my closet that previous night called out, "Hello?" I caught sight of that ghostly girl's reflection in a trophy case, but when I turned around, the hallway was empty and dim. Feeling a cold touch on my right hand, I quickly fled back to the dance, filled with panic. As I stepped into the dance hall, it was bustling with people in various costumes. Some were dancing away, while others stood awkwardly, clutching cups of Hawaiian punch. I began to search for Keith. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Hey Adam, I spotted Sarah." It was Keith coming up to me. "Man, I'm really on edge," I responded. I shared with him how I'd been seeing this strange girl repeatedly throughout the night. Keith casually dismissed it, suggesting that since it's Halloween, someone was probably just messing with me. Keith mentioned that Sarah was in a witch costume. Normally, this would have piqued my interest, but my mind was preoccupied. I joined the group of kids at the punch table, gathering my nerve to approach Sarah, who was chatting away with her friends. As I lifted my cup to drink, a chilling wind swept by, accompanied by whispers asking, "Do you want to dance?" followed by a giggle. Startled, I let go of my cup, watching it in dismay as it splattered on the floor, its contents spreading everywhere. The incident drew a lot of eyes my way, leaving me feel embarrassed. I saw Sarah glance over and noticed what happened. Unlike many others who giggled, her smile carried a hint of sympathy. I responded with a smile back, trying to convey how foolish I felt through my expression. Sarah's approach momentarily eclipsed my fears of the ghostly girl, as my heart pounded with a different kind of apprehension. My nervous anticipation was abruptly interrupted when I was suddenly shoved hard. Before I knew it, I was airborne, crashing to the floor and skidding slightly. Lying there, breathless and dazed, I looked up to see numerous faces gazing down at me, their expressions a mix of shock and confusion. "Are you all right?" inquired Sarah, her voice reaching me as I gazed up at her kneeling down beside me. "Let's go outside and get some fresh air," she suggested, not waiting for my reply. Together, we made our way to the exit leading outside. All the while, I was unable to escape the lingering haunting sensation. I know this might sound insane, I confessed to Sarah, but I'm sure there's some kind of evil presence following me. As we stepped outside, Sarah remarked that it appeared as if I had been pushed over by an invisible force back in the cafeteria. Then, glancing over her shoulder, I caught sight of the ghostly girl emerging from the doorway. She turned her head towards me to give me a scornful look. "Look," I said to Sarah as I pointed to the girl. "Who is she?" she asked. "She's been following me since my birthday last night, since my wish." The ghost then started to sprint towards us screaming. "What did you wish for?" Sarah asked as she clung tight onto me. As the ghost approached nearer, I answered, "A girlfriend." As I said that, the ghost evaporated like fine mist into the air, and the heavy weighing feeling lifted. With her eyes squeezed shut, Sarah gradually opened them and realized she was pressed close to me. She quickly apologized and stepped back. We both then scanned our surroundings, and after a brief moment, our eyes met again, leading to a burst of prolonged laughter from us both. A few others also saw what happened, though most were skeptical of our story. Despite this, it continues to be the most astonishing event I've ever experienced. Against all odds, Sarah and I have managed to stay together ever since. Now, we're extra cautious about what we wish for. On that midsummer night of Friday the 13th in 1990, Jenna, Kate, Tommy, and I were out cruising. Tommy, who was 21, had managed to get us a case of beer. We were searching for a cool spot to relax and enjoy a few drinks. Tommy suggested that roughly 30 minutes away, there was a lighthouse overlooking Lake Ontario, with a small beach close by for us to hang out. Initially, we were all hesitant, me especially, but eventually warmed up to the idea, realizing we had no better plans for our summer weekend. Thus, we embarked on our adventure. Drawing closer to our destination, the beacon of the lighthouse became increasingly visible with each pass, signaling our nearing arrival. Honestly, I was grateful for Tommy taking charge of the logistics. I was clueless about our whereabouts, and the area didn't seem too welcoming at that late hour, with its narrow private roads and thinly scattered homes. Nonetheless, Tommy found a spot to park the car. We collected a few essentials, some towels to sit on, a wise suggestion by the girls, and our beer. Following Tommy, who had been to this spot before, took the lead, guiding us through the night's escapade. We were led through clusters of trees, carefully avoiding any potential nearby residents as we made our way toward the shore. Upon emerging onto the beach, a refreshing cool breeze greeted us, accompanied by the soothing rhythm of waves breaking against the rocks. Up the shore to the right, the lighthouse's beam swept in a steady circle, casting a captivating glow that added to the night's enchantment. Tommy initiated the evening by popping open the first beer. I had considered joining in, but since I had committed to driving us back later, I opted to stay sober. I may had sneaked a couple sips in from Jenna, who I was dating. We then settled on some open spots among the beach rocks, relaxing in the vibrant atmosphere and savoring the refreshing lake breeze enhanced by the intermittent glow of the signal's guiding light. "Did you guys hear that?" asked Kate. We all looked over at her while giving a moment to listen. After a pause, none of us had heard anything. She insisted it sounded like someone had called out. Tommy, who was cuddled up next to her as they were dating, laughed and said she was just trying to spook us. "No, for real," she insisted. After a brief silence, she unleashed a spooky deep roar and thrust her hands forward, aiming to startle us. "You're so dumb," Tommy teased, casually taking another sip of his beer. We all shared a laugh before our focus drifted back to the vast lake, twinkling with stars. While the lighthouse faithfully sent out its signals and our conversation flowed from one subject to the next, an odd sight abruptly caught my eye. Looking out towards the darkened horizon, I spotted what seemed to be a few people in the water. "Check that out. Does it look like there's some people out there?" I inquired, gesturing towards the figures waiting in the water, highlighted by the sweeping glow of the lighthouse's beam. "Who would be out there at this time?" Jenna questioned. I instinctively drew near to Jenna, feeling slightly spooked. Tommy suggested they could just be some locals, yet he admitted the situation was odd given the time. Instead of swimming, they seemed to be just standing silently in the water, seemingly watching us without movement. Despite our attempts to concentrate on something else, staying detached proved challenging. This effort was further complicated when sounds started to resonate from their location shortly after. We tried to listen closely, but the sound of the waves interfered, making it hard to distinguish the noises. They appeared to be drifting farther into deeper waters. "Oh my God, I think they need help, guys," Jenna pointed out, as the sounds intensified and began to sound like desperate pleas. "How are we supposed to help, Jenna?" Tommy questioned, gazing at the silhouettes as another circling beam passes. "I'm getting creeped out, guys," Kate confessed, with all of us glued to the scene. As the figures gradually vanished into the darkness, Tommy couldn't help but laugh. "Oh man, that's so creepy." "Stop it, they might be in real danger," Kate retorted. Kate proposed we look for help, but the suggestion was quickly dismissed when Tommy pointed out our situation involving drinking, trespassing, and the improbability of anyone taking our story seriously. "Holy crap, guys," I blurted out, my attention caught by something among the shoreline rocks. I gestured towards where my eyes were locked. "Looks like there's someone there," I mentioned, my thoughts immediately jumping to the possibility of stumbling upon a corpse. "We should take a closer look," suggested Tommy. With careful steps, we proceeded to approach the spot, with the lighthouse's beam sweeping overhead, and as we moved closer, a voice suddenly pierced the silence, pleading, "Help me, please, help me." We turned towards the open water from where the sound seemed to emanate but saw nothing. "Okay guys, I'm freaking out," Kate voiced again, her anxiety clearly escalating. Kate and Jenna made it clear they did not desire advancing any further, leaving it to Tommy and me to explore the figure nestled in the rocks. As we slowly approached, I noticed my heart starting to beat faster. Tommy moved forward and with a hint of amusement declared, "Ha! It's only a towel," as he lifted a soaked towel from the rocks. "Just a towel," he repeated after briefly gazing the surroundings again. The wave of relief that washed over me with those words was immense. Glancing back at the girls and noticed their stress fade away too. I think we all felt at this point that given it's Friday the 13th, and with the events that had already unfolded, that anything moving forward was going to creep us out. We made our way back to the case of beers we had planted not far. I stopped for a moment to gaze out to the open water and see if I could spot those people we saw earlier. And just at that moment, I heard a man's voice yelling from behind us. A lighthouse keeper came toward us, visibly worried, mentioning he was on the verge of contacting the police. We quickly reassured him, explaining that we were simply enjoying the scenery and the lighthouse's presence on an eerie night, with no intention to cause any trouble. We then struck up a conversation with him, sharing our experiences of the night. He was actually a pretty nice guy. Although we offered him a beer, he declined. He mentioned that he was unaware of anyone who would venture out like that, and shared a few of his own eerie tales during his service at the lighthouse, a few echoing our own stories. It was a nice end to our night filled with mystery. Before we left, I sought a final solitary moment to look out over the vast lake, sensing that this experience would linger in my memory forever. I wanted to savor that last view, staring into the dark, endless expanse, with the ceaseless motion of the waves and the reassuring light of the lighthouse as my companion. Though I did scan for those figures seen earlier, I accepted it as just something beyond this world, smiling at the thought of our incredible Friday the 13th night. Jenna's tap on my shoulder came as a gentle prompt hinting, "Let's go." My name is Heather. I have a deep passion for everything related to fashion. I currently own a clothing shop in the Boston Metro, but a couple decades ago, when I first embarked on this journey, I encountered a truly horrifying experience that still occupies my thoughts today. It all started in the summer of 2005. The streets were brimming with potential customers during this vibrant season, and my foremost objective was to draw them into my store. On a particularly beautiful and Sunday Tuesday morning, I received the arrival of a rather large batch of fresh merchandise, along with the new seasonal marketing materials that I had eagerly anticipated. I cleared some space in the already crowded back room to accommodate the incoming shipment. The back room was already quite cramped, but I somehow managed to fit everything in and still had room to walk. While I awaited the arrival of morning customers, my first task of the day was to start working on the window display. I was thrilled with the fresh look of the mannequins that had been delivered. Their smooth, glossy plastic and meticulous detailing left a strong impression, and I was optimistic that they would attract the gaze of potential customers. The bells at my shop chimed, and my enthusiasm led me to say welcome. I directed my attention to the door and found my friend, Ashley, standing there. "Good morning," Ashley greeted me with a welcoming cup of coffee in hand. I smiled and responded, "You always seem to know exactly what I need, precisely when I need it," as we shared a warm embrace. "Wow, that's pretty creepy looking," Ashley remarked as she observed one of the new mannequins I was preparing to dress. I turned to look at it and responded, "Hey, she's beautiful." Ashley smiled and said she was kidding and it looked great. Our conversation shifted to our plans for the night, and I informed Ashley that I intended to spend a few extra hours at the store later that evening, due to the substantial amount of work I had piling. The rest of the day unfolded with typical Tuesday expectations, and I was provided with extra time to focus on projects. Time passed rapidly, and before I realized it, closing time had arrived. I locked up the store's doors and made my way to the back room. As I entered the back room, I was startled when I saw one of the mannequins seemingly staring at me. For a brief moment, I mistook it for a person. After moving it to the corner, I settled down to complete some closing tasks. Fully engrossed in my work, I suddenly heard some rustling on the shelves behind me. I turned around to investigate, but couldn't spot anything unusual. Just a moment later, one of the other mannequins began to topple over, and I quickly jumped to my feet to catch it. "Phew," I sighed, realizing I needed to place them more securely. As I glanced at the mannequin, a creepy sensation washed over me. I placed it back and wrapped up my work to head home. On the following day, I awoke feeling rather fatigued because I had experienced some rather unusual dreams. Occasionally, when I'm deeply immersed in my work, it continues to occupy my thoughts even while I sleep. I was feeling a bit stiff in the joints, which is very abnormal for me. Figured it was best to make a nice healthy breakfast. I prepared for the day and made my way back to the store. As I neared the shop, I noticed something strange. One of my mannequins was propped up against the window outside. I was baffled as how it had gotten there. Embarrassed and frustrated, and without wasting time, I grabbed it and promptly unlocked the store door before stepping inside. I moved through the store and reached the back room. I was astounded to find all my mannequins facing forward, as though they were welcoming me. My heart momentarily raced, but my logical instincts quickly kicked in, and I thought that Ashley was likely responsible for this. She had a key to my store, and this is definitely the kind of playful tricks she would pull. I sent her a text saying, "Haha, nice one," then continued with my opening procedures. Dressing the remaining mannequins became progressively challenging as my hands began to throb, and I sensed discomfort in my elbows as well. With no one present in the store, I decided to make my way to the back room for a break. I sat down to take a moment to rest and rehydrate. I continued to wait for Ashley's response, but 3 hours had now passed since I messaged her. Hungry and unprepared for lunch, I contemplated ordering delivery. Strangely, I found it difficult to reach for my phone. When I looked down, I was horrified to see that my arm appeared to be made of plastic, and it caused me intense pain. I struggled to move it, and then I heard faint whispers echoing around me. The room grew darker, and I jolted awake in terror, standing there, realizing that I had been asleep. The room returned to its normal state. My body, however, was still aching. I found myself fixated on a particular mannequin that seemed eerily different from the rest. The way it looked at me was deeply troubling. Ashley had remarked on its spookiness, and I must concede that she was right. "Hello?" A customer's voice suddenly interrupted my thoughts. Bringing me back to the present moment, I struggled to get up and move over, saying, "Yes, sorry, I was just in the back." It was then that I noticed there was no actual customer. Confused, I cautiously called out, "Is anyone in here?" into the empty store. And just in that moment, I heard a buzz in my pocket. It was Ashley. She conveyed to me that she was feeling unwell and that she had been home all night and morning. Shortly after, I detected more chatter emanating from the back room. As I tried to send a message back to Ashley, I felt my concentration on the phone diminishing. A sensation of dizziness and an increasing perception of something being amiss overcame me rapidly. In that very moment, I fainted and collided with the floor. Transitioning into a dreamlike state, I suddenly found myself in what could only be described as a distorted version of the back room. It was an unsettling scene, filled with a peculiar mixture of candles and mannequins. Strangely, I was immobilized and experienced intense pain that seemed to permeate every part of my body. The urge to cry out was overwhelming, but I found myself unable to do so. The dream then shifted to my bedroom, where I lay in my bed, surrounded once again by candles and an abundance of mannequins. There were so many. Initially, they appeared normal, but gradually assumed a sinister and evil presence. "Ma'am?" came a faint and concerned whisper as I lay there, completely frozen. "Ma'am?" I heard once more as I gradually regained consciousness, realizing that I was sprawled out on the shop floor. I gazed at the young woman who was kneeling beside me, anxiously looking over me. "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry," I uttered, but her primary concern was my well-being. Still feeling quite disoriented, I offered my gratitude for her help and informed her that I should close the shop early for the day. She nodded in understanding and wished me good luck. As the sound of departing bells chimed, I shifted my attention to the back room. While I knew I had to make my exit, my purse, containing my keys to my apartment, was a priority. Stepping towards the back, I momentarily paused as I locked eyes with that particular ominous-looking mannequin. It was as if I half expected it to spring to life. "Come on, do it," I taunted, but it just stood there with its expressionless gaze. I drew a deep breath, determined to shake off the unsettling sensation as best I could. With a little resolve, I reached for my purse and swiftly made my way towards the exit. Throughout the entire process, my eyes remained fixed on that particular mannequin. I turned off the lights, shut the door, and then proceeded to lock and secure the store as I stepped outside. I headed home without any hesitation. I took immediate action by scheduling the removal of the mannequins for the next day. I had no desire to set foot in that store until they were completely gone. I even made a special request for them to dispose of the one I believed to be responsible for all the menacing action. Even though I had physically left the shop behind, an eerie and haunting feeling still clung to me. The next morning, I arrived at the store to unlock the doors for the workers tasked with removing the mannequins. I didn't delve into the full story. Instead, I simply mentioned that the mannequins gave me the creeps, eliciting laughter from them. Despite feeling fatigued and sore all over, I patiently awaited for the moment they would bring out the ghostly mannequin. A moment later, I observed them moving it, but just before its head came into view, I turned my gaze away. I had no desire to lay eyes on it again. The knowledge that it would be cremated brought a sense of relief, and a satisfying smile formed on my face.